"Lean closer," my brother-in-law whispered beside the casket. "You owe me, and don't embarrass yourself today." I froze. "Excuse me?" He smiled like he owned the room. "You heard me." My hands shook because I knew what he was really threatening. Then I saw the lawyer walking straight toward us. I'm Tessa Morgan, and I'm 34. I work as a medical billing specialist at a small clinic downtown. It's honest work, but it barely covers rent, groceries, and the leftover debt from my divorce 2 years ago. Most months I'm juggling which bill gets paid first and which one waits. My sister, Claire, was the one person who made everything feel manageable. She was kind in a way that didn't ask for credit. She remembered birthdays, she called just to check in, and whenever the family started bickering, she'd step in and smooth it all out before anyone said something they couldn't take back. She was the glue, and without her, everything was already starting to fall apart. Then there was her husband, Derek. In public, Derek was the picture of charm. He shook hands firmly, remembered everyone's name, laughed at the right moments. People at the funeral kept squeezing his arm and telling him how sorry they were, like he was the only one who lost someone. But I knew the private version, the version that monitored Claire's spending, questioned her phone calls, and slowly cut her off from anyone who wasn't useful to him. Nobody talked about that Derek, though. To them, he was the grieving husband, and I was the extra sibling, the one they called when they needed someone to pick up groceries or sit with mom during her appointments. I wasn't rich or glamorous, but I had something they didn't expect. If you've ever been dismissed by people who were supposed to love you, this story is going to hit close to home. Grief has a strange way of ripping off masks and showing you exactly who people really are. If you've ever been treated like your pain didn't matter, like your presence was an inconvenience, then stay with me. Subscribe, drop your story below, and click hype or like if you've ever had to stay strong in a room full of fake love. The reception was held in the church lobby, a big open space with folding tables covered in white cloth and aluminum trays of food nobody was really eating. The smell of stale coffee and too many flower arrangements hung in the air, sweet and suffocating. I was standing near the back wall, holding a cup of water I hadn't taken a single sip from, when Derek appeared beside me. He didn't approach the way a normal person would, he just materialized, like he'd been waiting for the right moment when nobody important was watching. "You need to talk about Claire's accounts," he said. His voice was low, almost gentle, the way you'd talk to a child you were trying to keep calm. "She borrowed from me, Tessa. A lot, and she told me if anything ever happened, you'd make sure it was handled." I stared at him. "Claire never mentioned that to me." He tilted his head slightly. "Your sister made promises, your family, so you handle it." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It looked official, with typed paragraphs and a signature line at the bottom. He wanted me to sign something that would give him access to a safe deposit box Claire and I had shared since our mother got sick. I shook my head slowly. "I'm not signing anything today, Derek. This isn't the time." His expression didn't change, but his volume did. He spoke just loud enough for the cluster of relatives near the coffee table to hear. "I'm not asking for anything unreasonable. I'm just trying to settle Claire's affairs, and you're making this difficult." Heads turned. My aunt set down her plate. My cousin's wife leaned over and whispered something. Derek raised both hands like he was surrendering. "I don't want to cause a scene. I just thought family helped family." He looked around the room with this wounded expression, and I watched people buy it in real time. My uncle walked over and put his hand on Derek's shoulder. "Tessa," he said quietly, not even looking at me fully, "why would you do this today?" I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. The room had already decided I was the problem. I could feel my sister's absence like a hole in the floor, and everyone was staring at me like I had put it there. Over the next 2 days, the family closed ranks around Derek like he was made of glass. I wasn't invited to the meeting about Claire's memorial arrangements. When I called my aunt to ask about the flowers, she said Derek had already handled everything, and maybe I should give him space to grieve. Exclusion doesn't always come with a locked door. Sometimes it comes with a gentle suggestion that you step back, that you're not needed, that someone else is more qualified to mourn. Then came the dinner, a small gathering at my uncle's house the night before the will reading. Derek stood at the head of the table and told a story about me. He said Claire used to worry about my finances constantly. He said I was always late on bills, always calling her for help, always one bad month away from real trouble. He shook his head sadly while he said it, like it pained him to share. And the worst part was the nodding. My aunt nodded, my cousin nodded, even my mother, sitting in the corner with her oxygen tank, looked down at her hands like she was ashamed. Nobody asked me if it was true, nobody even looked at me. The next morning, Derek caught me alone in my car before I pulled out of the driveway. He knocked on my window, and when I rolled it down, he handed me another set of papers. Just sign this. It's temporary, standard stuff, just until the estate is sorted out. I looked at the pages. There were terms I didn't understand, references to accounts I'd never seen, and a line at the bottom with my name already typed next to the signature space. "Do it for your sister's peace," he said softly. "That's all this is." I didn't sign. I rolled the window up and drove away, but my hands were trembling on the steering wheel, and my eyes were blurring with tears I hadn't given myself permission to cry yet. Because in the middle of all this grief and humiliation, I had started noticing things, small things. The way Derek mentioned specific dollar amounts that didn't match what Claire had told me. The way he talked about accounts Claire never would have let him manage. The way his confidence about the will reading felt rehearsed, like a man who had already written the ending in his head. When the lawyer confirmed the reading was scheduled for the following afternoon, Derek smiled at everyone in the room. He squeezed my mother's hand, thanked my uncle for his support during this difficult time, and looked completely at ease. He had no idea what was waiting for him.
What Derek didn't know was that I had been paying attention for years. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, the way you notice cracks in a wall before anyone else admits the house is shifting. I had saved everything. Every text Claire sent me late at night when Derek was asleep. Every voicemail where her voice was thin and careful, like she was afraid of being overheard. Every email where she asked me to hold on to this just in case. There was one night in particular that changed everything for me. Claire called me at 1 a.m. She was whispering. She told me Derek had moved money out of their joint savings without telling her, and that when she asked about it, he told her she was remembering wrong. That was the night I started a folder on my phone. Screenshots, timestamps, saved voicemails backed up to my cloud. I didn't know what I was building at the time. I just knew something was wrong, and I didn't want to be caught without proof when the day came. And now the day had come. What they didn't know was that I had a plan they never saw coming. The will itself was 14 pages long. That's not normal. People don't write 14 pages unless they have something very specific to say, and they're afraid someone will try to bury it. Claire had been deliberate. Claire had been prepared, and she had done it all without Derek knowing. The lawyer's name was Mr. Albert Finch. He was in his late 60s, with silver hair combed neatly to one side, and reading glasses that he wore on a chain around his neck. He had known our family for over 20 years. He'd handled our father's estate, our mother's medical power of attorney, and now Claire's will. The day before the reading, he found me standing alone outside the church, staring at the parking lot like it held answers. He walked up slowly and stood beside me without saying a word for almost a full minute. Then he spoke. "Your sister came to see me 3 times in her last year," he said. "She was very specific about what she wanted." I looked at him. "He mentioned you by name," he continued, and she left instructions that go beyond money." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I want you to know that her husband has called my office 4 times this week. He's asked who will be present at the reading. He's asked whether certain documents can be summarized instead of read in full. He's asked if portions can be handled privately." I felt my stomach tighten. "I told him no," Mr. Finch said. "Every page will be read, every clause will be honored. That's what Claire wanted." He looked at me over the top of his glasses. "Just be there tomorrow. Bring whatever you have, and don't let anyone pull you into a hallway to sign something before we begin." I nodded. For the first time in days, I felt like someone in this family actually saw me. That night, I didn't sleep much, but I also didn't cry. I sat at my kitchen table with my phone open, scrolling through the folder I'd built over the years, and I felt something shift inside me. Not anger exactly, something steadier, something that felt like my sister standing right behind me whispering, "You're ready." The reading took place at 2 o'clock in Mr. Finch's office. It was a small room with dark wood bookshelves, a long table, and chairs that creaked when you shifted your weight. The smell of old leather and paper filled the space. Derek sat at one end, dressed in a charcoal suit, hands folded neatly in front of him. My aunt and uncle sat together near the middle. My mother was there in her wheelchair, breathing quietly through her cannula. I sat across from Derek. He didn't look at me. Mr. Finch opened a thick folder and laid the will flat on the table. 14 pages. He began reading. The first few pages were what you'd expect: personal belongings, sentimental items, a few small charitable donations Claire had arranged. But then the language changed. Page 6 included a clause that stated no individual could access Claire's personal savings, investment accounts, or the safe deposit box without meeting specific legal conditions verified by Mr. Finch himself. Derek's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Page 9 was where the room got quiet. Mr. Finch read Claire's own words aloud. "If anyone pressures my sister Tessa into signing documents, making financial agreements, or giving up access to shared assets during or after my passing, I want it on record that this behavior is not authorized by me and does not reflect any agreement I ever made." Derek leaned forward. "That's not relevant. Claire and I discussed all of this privately." Mr. Finch looked at him calmly. "Mr. Hale, I'll ask you to wait until I've finished." Page 11 referenced supporting documentation. Mr. Finch turned to me. "Tessa, your sister indicated that you may have correspondence that supports the concerns she outlined in this section. Do you have those with you?" I reached into my bag and pulled out a printed stack of screenshots and a small USB drive with saved voicemails. My hands were steady. I read one text message aloud. It was from Claire, sent at 11:47 on a Tuesday night. It said, "He told me I owe him for everything. He said if I leave, he'll make sure I get nothing. Please save this, Tess. Save it all." The room didn't move. Derek's face went pale, then red. He pushed his chair back. "This is ridiculous. She was emotional when she wrote that. You can't use that against me in a legal setting." Mr. Finch removed his glasses. "This is not a courtroom, Mr. Hale. This is a will reading, and your wife made her wishes exceptionally clear." My aunt stared at the table. My uncle pulled his hand away from Derek's shoulder for the first time all week. My mother looked at me, and her eyes were filled with something I hadn't seen in days. It wasn't pity, it was pride. The will's terms stood exactly as Claire had written them. Derek couldn't touch the safe deposit box. He couldn't access Claire's personal accounts without legal review. The so-called debts he claimed I owed were addressed directly on page 13, in Claire's own handwriting scanned into the document. My sister Tessa owes nothing to my husband. Any claim otherwise is false. There was no dramatic courtroom moment, no shouting, just silence and the slow crumbling of a story Derek had been telling for years. My aunt approached me in the parking lot afterward.
She didn't apologize with words exactly. She just stood there and said, "I didn't know, Tessa." I nodded. That was enough. Not because it made up for anything, but because I was done needing their approval to feel whole. I drove home with the windows down. The February air was cold against my face, but I didn't roll them up. I thought about Claire, about how she sat in that lawyer's office, probably alone, probably scared, and wrote 14 pages to make sure I wouldn't have to fight without proof. My sister didn't leave me money to feel rich. She left me truth so I could finally stand up without shaking.
If you've ever been pressured to keep the peace during the worst moment of your life, if someone has used your grief to manipulate you, or if you've been painted as the greedy one for simply asking questions, then this story was for you. Subscribe if you want more stories like this, and share your own experience in the comments. Have you ever dealt with funeral pressure, will drama, or being accused of wanting something you never asked for? I want to hear it. Click hype to help this story reach others who need it. Standing up for yourself is tough, especially when the people making it hard are the ones who are supposed to love you. If you've been there, subscribe and become part of our community. Let me know this story helped by clicking hype, and tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel, from small towns to big cities and everywhere in between. You're not alone in this.